to your main home WebEx homepage.
We're being recorded right now. I was also just going to say, I do have a screencast version of this that I'll go ahead and say I know at least one of you actually watched, because you let me know that you watched it. So if you want to see a screencast version of this, which will definitely have more of my ideas probably, simply because I was the only one talking, let me know. I'll send it to you. But John, you can also feel free to post that screencast version somewhere if you would like.
Yeah, I plan to post it on the faculty learning community, and we can send everybody a link. So if you can't go to all this, you can see it later. Yay, because there's been a lot of requests of people that can't attend. Thanks, Eric.
I'm just going to read through a couple of chats. Beth is hoping to, she says, she spends a lot of time grading and crafting quality feedback. I feel like a personal tutor. I want to learn how to give the same quality in less time. I think that's a great goal. One of the things that everyone really wanted to talk about at Westminster and Boulder County earlier in this week were what I was calling efficiencies. So I'm going to put that in the efficiencies bucket. I mean, how do we do the same quality in less time? How can we be more efficient? From Kevin to everyone, I want to develop methods of moving online discussion beyond superficial interactions and treatments of the material. Yeah, it's not clear that students are appreciating the arguments behind the material because we spend so much time clarifying the claims and confusions involved. Okay. I think what Kevin's pointing out here is the interactions that we have with our students in discussions really does come across to students as assessment and feedback, or certainly feedback. It's feedback of a formative sort, and if we can find ways to capitalize on that work that we probably are already doing in discussion with our students and make that more productive, I think we could all benefit from that. Fran says, I've been trying to encourage students to respond to my comments in the quizzes after tests are graded, especially when they have low grades. Some respond and send corrections, but most don't, some don't. Yes, I will definitely talk about that, Fran. I don't know that I have a solution, but I will say this in kind of a precursor. It doesn't really make sense to me to talk about being more efficient in feedback if our students aren't actually reading and utilizing the feedback we're already giving. I'm not sure being more efficient with feedback is worth thinking about. I mean, so if our students aren't reading and utilizing the feedback, then it doesn't matter how efficient we are. So I really like what Fran is asking. How do we encourage students to actually utilize the feedback and find it meaningful so that they actually then take advantage of the feedback? I like that. Tanya says, I'd like to say that I want a better way to give good feedback, but not having it take so much time. Yeah, I hear you. All right, I'm going to, this is the way I want to run this session. I am still struggling after a couple of years to think about the best way to facilitate WebEx sessions. What I really want to do is foster some discussion among us, teachers who clearly care enough about teaching and learning and feedback and assessment to log in on a Friday. I hope to provoke discussion to challenge the assumptions we might have about feedback and assessment. I certainly have my point of view. I'm happy to share my point of view, but I'm really just hoping this generates some ideas for further discussion. I would also just like to get out there right away. If this encourages you to think about assessment and feedback in your own classes, I would encourage you to email me and maybe work with me one-on-one in a coaching capacity. You know, that would really be great. Or to find an opportunity to, I don't know, when you're doing your course reflection for your online lead, if you haven't already done that, you know, this might be an opportunity to, you know, you'll have something to say when you report out on, you know, that quality guideline on feedback and assessment. All right, I'm going to take the next, say, 5 minutes and just lay a little bit of groundwork to give us a common language to talk about, and maybe I'll suggest a few things that we might want to talk about. And then I am going to maybe start with one of the things that one of you wants to talk about, and then I will give anybody who wants to chime in a chance to chime in. If you'll do what I say and not what I do, try to keep your comments concise so everyone can get a chance to chime in, and then when we kind of run that to ground, we'll move on and talk about something else. I'm going to click through these slides, but I think if you look up on your screen, I've loaded, I'm going to try to read the chat and talk. I am not good at multitasking, so if there's something in the chat that I'm missing, please, John, let me know, or someone just chime in, unmute your mic and let me know. But I will, while you're talking, I'll try to read the chat window. All right, these notes are really generated after I led these discussions at Westminster and Boulder County on Monday. So I kind of took some good ideas from what we had in those discussions and framed some of the things we talked about maybe as just a way to get us going here. So first of all, I'll say, I think it's worthwhile to think about assessment and feedback as two different but related things. So again, they're in one course quality guideline, but I think it makes sense to think of them as separate but connected. And I'll just give you my take on it, and certainly you can chime in and tell me if you think I'm wrong or right. Assessment comes first. So assessment is one of two things. We can talk about an assessment, which would be an instrument that we use to assess what students know. So that could be a quiz, it could be a discussion question, a paper, right? It would be a tool that we use to assess student learning. Or if we talk about doing assessment, I think what we are doing is we are judging or measuring students' abilities or skills, and we're judging or measuring them against some rubric that we have about the course quality guidelines, or the course outcomes for the class. So we are doing assessment when we're actually measuring how much our students know or don't know. Feedback is something that comes after assessment, right? So we've done the assessment, we've graded the assignment, we have made a judgment about what the student knows, and now we have to figure out what kind of feedback do I give to the student, either in written, video, or audio format, whatever format we give it in. What kind of narrative or comments or rubric, what do I give back to the student that, I want to tell them about the assessment that I did? So I think we might want to think about assessment and feedback in that way. And then I think we also might want to think about the difference between formative and summative. And I'll tell you why. And then I do have an agenda here, or at least something I've been thinking about that I definitely would like your feedback on. When we think about formative assessment, what we mean is we are assessing the student's learning in progress, right? So a formative assessment would be when we look at a draft of a paper. The student is in the process of writing, and that draft is a formative element of their work. So if we were to give feedback on a formative assessment, we would be giving them feedback on that work in progress. We would be capitalizing on that teachable moment, really trying to give feedback aimed at helping the student produce a summative work, right? That final version of the paper that we're hoping that they do. I think it's the same sort of thing if we give a homework assignment that's a formative homework assignment with problems that are helping students learn how to work the problems that they're going to have to work on the midterm, for instance. So one thing I want to throw out is, if we have a limited amount of time, and I can tell from the comments that we all have a limited amount of time to teach, how do we decide whether to prioritize assessment and feedback on formative work or summative work, or both? And I guess that depends on what our goals are and why we're doing the assessment and why we're giving feedback. So I definitely would like to talk about that. I'd also just like to throw out this idea that when we think about a face-to-face class, we are doing formative assessment continually for those 45 face-to-face contact hours, right? We are assessing what our students know as a group, individually, because we are listening to what they say when we're talking to them. We know the kinds of questions they're asking. We can look at their faces and see if they're understanding us or not. I'm not sure how we do that online. So I don't know. That's the kind of frame that I want to have behind us, assessment and feedback, and then think about, what kind of feedback might make sense on formative work and what kind of feedback might make sense on summative work. And I said I had an agenda, something I've been thinking a lot about. I'll just say, for most of my teaching career, I definitely focused on summative feedback. I would focus most of my effort on giving feedback on papers and midterms and that sort of thing, and I certainly thought much less about formative feedback. I've really been rethinking that this semester, and I'm curious what you think. I will just throw out as I'll say a provocative claim, maybe we should be spending more of our time on formative assessment and feedback and less of our time on summative. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'll throw that out there. I'm also really interested in this idea. If our students aren't reading, watching, or listening to feedback, is it worth giving it in the first place? So my question to you is, do you know if your students are attending to your feedback? Are they reading it, are they watching it, and are they listening to it? And then I think the subsequent but related question is, are they actually utilizing the feedback that you're giving them toward mastering the learning outcomes that you want them to master? And so my question to you again is, how do we know if our students are utilizing our feedback the way we want them to? I'm going to give you a minute to think about that. If anybody wants to chime in on any of that stuff, I will let you, and I'm going to take a minute to scroll through the chat. So if you would like to, unmute your mic and jump in.
Eric, just to clarify, the summative is the feedback along the way, and then the formative is just feedback at the end?
No, I think it's the other way around.
Oh, the other way around,
no,
right?
Summative is the end, right? It's I look at the word. So yeah, so maybe you had it right. Yeah. I guess I think about it. Forming is it's that formation of student learning. It's when they're, at least the way I'm thinking about it, it's that work in progress, right? It's that intervening while the learning's happening, as opposed to summative. Summative is at the end. It's more like here's the way someone explained it earlier today. Summative feedback is really justifying the grade you give. Formative feedback is really more about advice on how to improve their work. So I'm not sure that's entirely accurate, but it really did ring true for me, right? When I spend all that time giving comments on the paper, once they've turned the paper in, that's summative feedback. It's assuming that they're going to use those skills on the next paper. It's formative to that extent, but I don't know. That's where we're kind of justifying their final grade, whereas comments on a draft are clearly not, justifying a grade because they haven't gotten a grade yet. Fran wants to be unmuted. You're unmuted, Fran.
I just want to make one comment. We're talking about the positive feedback that we're getting from students. I basically use the quizzes and have them show that they're learning. I'm teaching reading, so it's something where they have to do reading on their own all the time. But I do get some good feedback. I did today. I got 2 students who were below the passing grade in the 60% instead of 70%, and they came back and took my comments and said, "Gee, thank you for giving me these ideas. Here's my corrections that I made that you let me make." And it improved their grade, partial grade, but it improved their grade. But again, you feel that you're getting the response here. I guess I still want to go back to the point of how do I get perhaps the students that aren't responding, who aren't taking that chance to be able to improve themselves. I don't know. And I'm still back to that, I think, the beginning.
Well, let me throw this question out to everybody, because I think this is something we all face. And again, I think it rings true with what I just said. If I'm going to devote my time to give formative feedback, because my goal is that I'm giving feedback with the intention that a student uses that feedback to actually do better on the next assignment, how can I encourage, I'm putting the fake quotes up with my fingers, or force, coerce, incentivize, how can we encourage students to actually read our feedback and use it? I will just open it up to the floor. If you've got an idea, unmute your mic and give it to us. I have some. I'm going to wait till the end. I want to know what you guys think.
I'll jump in real quick. The that early student feedback survey that we just did I don't believe it directly asked if students utilize feedback. That's something we could do right there. But I did notice in the comments students were mentioning my feedback, which is why I know that they are reading it. But we could just be much more direct and just ask them 2 or 3 weeks in, how are you using the feedback? What do you think of the feedback, etc.
So Beth, would you make that into an assignment?
The early alert, the early feedback survey we just did, would I make that into an assignment?
No, I didn't mean that. What I wondered is, we could ask it on the survey, but I was just thinking not everybody's taken the survey, for one thing. I just thought you could turn that into assignment. 3 weeks in, you could say, everyone should do a short essay in the Dropbox and let me know how you're making use of the feedback I'm giving you, or why you're not making use of it. That's what I was thinking.
That would, I think, at least, direct them to become more self-conscious and more intentional about how they're using it. Yeah, I think that would be a good idea to a point, because, we also, I think most of us, we have a lot of content we have to get through, and adding assignments that aren't specifically content related, we'd have to think really hard about that every time we did that.
I'm going to refrain from commenting on everything, so I'm going to be quiet and let someone else jump in.
Can you hear me? Go ahead, Martha.
We see you. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. I noticed at first when I started teaching online that students weren't reading the feedback, and I think a lot of students didn't know where to find it. And so now I've started sending out the first 2 weeks an email, make sure you click on the feedback, so they just kind of to teach them how to do that. And I also say I can tell if you've read the feedback or not, kind of a little bit big brother approach, big sister approach. And so, and I say that generally students who read the feedback do better in the classes. So I think that email the first 2 weeks, just to teach them how to click on the right button so they know how to see the feedback, has helped me.
I do want to jump in here quickly just to clarify. I think that's a great idea, and you can see in the chat I typed in the word metacognition. I'm going to throw out some. I don't think we can underestimate our students' ability to do metacognition about teaching and learning. I don't think we should assume they know we're giving feedback. I don't think we should assume that they're going to take it seriously. I think we can be more explicit about, I take feedback really seriously. It's a way that I try to teach online, and I'm giving feedback, and it's going to be personal, or I'm doing it because I think it'll help you learn. Here's where you find it. Think about this. I hate to say it, but it's true. There are plenty of instructors online that aren't giving much feedback. Students may have been in courses where there wasn't any feedback posted. So, if you're spending the time to do the feedback, it is definitely worth making sure students know that you're doing it, remind them that you're doing it, let them know where to find it. And, there are many places in D2L where students can find feedback. So, think about where you're putting it. Students can find feedback on quizzes through the quiz tool. They can find feedback for discussions through discussions, assuming you're using They can go to the Dropbox. They can go to the gradebook. So, you know, I think we really have to let students know where we're doing it. Tanya just said, thanks for the prompt feedback. I think we can also just announce, you know, in a news item, you know, I posted feedback for, you know, quiz number 2, make sure to go look for it, that sort of thing. So I think that's a great idea. I mean, it doesn't take long to let students know where the feedback is. Maybe even, I don't know, if you're like me, you probably don't log in as the demo student all that often. Maybe we should be more proactive into actually entering feedback for the demo student so we can actually look the way the student sees things and see how they see the feedback. Have you ever actually gone in as a student to see what the feedback looks like from a student perspective? But I'm going to throw this back out. Any other ideas on how we can encourage students to read or utilize feedback?
Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay. My students always see my feedback because I do it just in the grade book. And so when they open their grades, and you can see this in the demo student, they have their score, and they don't have to click on anything to see feedback. It's right there in the grade book. Now, the drawback to that is I can't do an audio feedback. But if you, that's just what I do, and then I never have to tell them, okay, go over here, click on feedback. It's right there in the grade book, and so that's just an idea.
I agree, and you know, Kristen, I hate to admit this, but for the first time, I mean, I just looked at that the other day, and I realized that all the feedback you put anywhere really should show up in that student grade screen. I'll offer you a suggestion that someone else gave me, Kristen, who's found something similar. They had screencast feedback, which they wouldn't show up in the grade book. What they did is they just made a note. I have a screencast for you. Check your email. So, I mean, or, you know, that way when students go to the grade book, they won't be able to click on it, but they can see that the audio or screencast feedback is somewhere. I mean, that's at least a suggestion.
Oh, yeah, so that's a great idea. And I'm just another drawback again to doing, so my plus is that students, if they're looking at their grades, they're seeing their feedback automatically. The drawback is no audio, and D2L does not, cross-reference feedback. No, if you do it here, it doesn't show up there. So I mean, that's just another idea.
Yes. Martha asks, if we put feedback in the gradebook, will it show up in the Dropbox as feedback read? I do not know the answer to that. I simply don't know. I will either let John follow up on that, or we can, you know, look into
the answer.
Answer away.
No, that's what I was saying. It doesn't cross-reference. You can feedback in the gradebook, or you can feedback in the Dropbox, and they don't show up in the other places. So for a version of what you were saying is like, well, maybe feedback in the gradebook is say, go check your Dropbox for more extended, something you have to train them to go to certain places. And I think each class is different. This teacher, I'm used to seeing feedback from this teacher in the Dropbox. I'm used to seeing feedback from this teacher in the gradebook. They do not cross-communicate through D2L.
I am making a note to pass this along because D2L does listen to us, so I think it would make sense that all the feedback would be fed into the gradebook. So maybe there's a way to make that happen in D2L 10.3, which we'll get to at some point. So I'm making a note to check on that.
We're actually going to 10.2 just announced today, Eric.
I was thinking we wouldn't get to it until 10.3, but...
Oh, gotcha. And just a reminder for everyone, you can always impersonate your demo student if you want to see how they're seeing your feedback. I mean, that's, I know for me in my class, it's often seems like it jumps all over the place, but if you just impersonate the demo student, then you can see exactly where it goes.
Hey, John, what do you think about the idea of doing a screencast as the demo student and actually walking a student through, you know, here are the 2 to 3 places you're going to find feedback. It'll either be in the gradebook or it'll be in the Dropbox. And if you have actually entered information for the demo student, you could, you know, I haven't done it, but I'm thinking that might be a good idea for students.
Yeah, I think I've definitely done that a lot with my class, especially like if we want to show them how they look at rubrics for assignments. It's not so intuitive how they show up. So if you just make a quick screencast and put it in your news item or put it somewhere accessible, or you can even just send your whole class an email with a direct link on how to do it. I think that works really well.
I'm going to jump in. Kristen, you're sending chats privately, so Martha's not seeing your replies. So you just want to change your send to everyone. Martha, Kristen said no, you can't do that. Other ideas on how to encourage students to read feedback or to find out if they're using feedback? I'll throw out a couple other ideas and maybe someone else is still thinking. This is something that I've learned from the person I'm co-teaching with, Carrie Mitchell. Yeah, Kevin says have them summarize the feedback. I like that idea. For instance, what you could do on the final, if it's a process and you give informative feedback and you want them to use that for the final, whatever it is, the final lab report, the lab, whatever it is, you could really say a part of what you do for your final product is comment on how you utilize the feedback that I gave you or that your peers gave you, and that could be part of the grade. It's a possibility. I'll also suggest that I've been experimenting with incentives. Sometimes what I've been trying this semester is if I'm dropping feedback somewhere, I'll say, if you're actually reading this feedback, send me an email and I'll give you a point of extra credit. Now in my classes, extra credit really doesn't amount to anything, but I found that it's irrelevant. Students enjoy finding that little treasure, that little Easter egg where they feel like they're earning something. I'm doing those in my screencasts. So I'm doing lots of screencasts for my course. I'm doing midweek screencasts. I should say we. I'm co-teaching with Carrie Mitchell. Yeah, Easter eggs, that's a term from online, from websites and games, right? So you find these little hidden treats places and you feel like you're on a treasure hunt. But we've been doing lots of screencasts to give feedback to the whole class. And we really wondered, are students actually watching these videos? And so we've been dropping Easter eggs once in a while into our screencast. So 10 minutes in, we'll say something like, if you're still listening, send us an email and let us know. Or, we'll tell them a joke halfway through and say, let us know if you thought the joke was funny or something like that. I mean, it's a way to kind of build rapport and humor with students, but it's also a way for me to judge, are students actually watching? And I'll just let you know, we're finding 3/4 of our students are actually watching the videos, which I will say makes it a lot easier to devote the time to do the screencasts when I know that 3/4 of the students are actually using them. Yes, Kevin says, maybe you could mention that such hidden treasures exist. What we did is we didn't mention it up front, but after we did one, then the next week we said, those of you who see the extra credit in the gradebook, you know why, and those of you who didn't, maybe you'll find the next Easter egg. So, I mean, we kind of made it a little bit mysterious. Other thoughts? Fran, go for it.
I don't think I've raised my hand.
I'm sorry.
I'm just, I don't know what happened. I was just sitting here musing, and I really don't have anything to say.
All right, I'm gonna mute you again then. Before I move on to the next thing I would like to talk about, someone else jump in. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to get input from your colleagues on? What question do you have? What do you want to talk about? First come, first serve. Jump in.
I have a problem with students don't turn in assessment on time and fall disqualified and then wonder why they didn't.
Yeah, Jennifer, your sound is breaking up. We can hear maybe every other word. So maybe try typing into the chat window. I'm not sure what was up with that. Martha wants time-saving tips and giving feedback. I will offer one, and then everyone else can jump in if they want to. And then we'll get to Jennifer's question. So how about some time-saving tips? I'm going to actually just click over to my efficiencies. So here are a few. Think about your goals, because I think if we don't know why we're giving feedback and what we want out of it, it doesn't matter how efficient we are. So I think, number one, think about what the goal is for giving feedback. And if you have a goal, then you can think about how to be more efficient about giving that particular kind of feedback. We've already talked about some of these. If your students don't know where to find it, it doesn't matter how efficient you are. And if they're, if they're not using it, it doesn't matter. Using rubrics, so if you're not already using rubrics, that is a possibility as a way to be more efficient and timely. Make the best use of D2L assessment tools. For instance, I know there are things in D2L, for instance, making a discussion an assessed discussion instead of not an assessed discussion, or using the grade mark aspect of Turnitin.com. That's something that I only learned about this week. So it may be worth dropping into the Instructional Design Center to make sure that you are fully utilizing all the efficiencies built into D2L itself. Consider screencasts or audio feedback. I know there are people in this meeting that are using this, and I think it may not necessarily be faster, but it may be more efficient to the extent that you can give better quality feedback in the same amount of time, and students may be more likely to actually listen to it. One of the reasons one of my colleagues uses screencast feedback is this. A student can only get the feedback if they listen to the screencast. They can't only flip over and look at the grade. So it's really prioritizing the feedback because students really have to listen to it. So screencasts or audio, a possibility. And you can even do 1-minute audio feedback, right? I mean, you can do really short audio feedback, and that may be extremely important to students to actually hear that personal voice from you. I'm going to make a suggestion, number 8 on my list here. One way to be efficient is to realize we only have a limited amount of time to give any kind of feedback. We only have a limited number of hours in the day to do assessment and feedback of any kind. So one way to be efficient is to figure out what really matters and to focus our time and energy on the things that matter the most. I am going to make a suggestion that thinking about prioritizing or capitalizing on formative assessment as opposed to summative might be more efficacious for us and our students. And here's why. When we give formative assessment, we're actually capturing the teachable moment. Let me get back to my slide here. We are actually teaching at the same time that we're assessing and giving feedback. We're closing the loop and really helping students aim toward mastery. Formative assessment and formative feedback really values the learning process, which is what we tell students, right? I mean, it's the learning process that's important, and the final product is great. That's what we're going to, we're going to be measured on that. But, I wonder if we have a limited amount of time, is our time better spent giving feedback during the learning process as opposed to justifying the grade after they've finished? Now, if you had an unlimited amount of time and energy, then we could give an unlimited amount of formative and summative feedback. I'm guessing you don't, and so I'm suggesting the possibility of thinking about prioritizing formative over summative. I think formative also really attends to instructor presence, and I think there are efficiencies, and I'll just show you this. What our students are telling us, I think, is that Instructor presence is extremely important to them when they think about a quality online class. These 3 overlapping circles that you're seeing came from an analysis of what students said about master teachers. We had 90 students last year submit master teacher nominations. And I plotted the themes that they talked about on these 3 overlapping circles which represent 3 of our course quality guidelines. Instructor presence was by far the most common reason a student said that they had a great experience in a class. And many of those comments bled over into what I would really consider feedback and assessment. Students definitely wanted quick, fast, timely, and regular feedback. They wanted feedback to be constructive and fair, but they wanted feedback to be personal, right? They wanted an instructor who knew who they were, who were making comments that were relevant to the work they were doing and weren't perceived as just things that were copied and pasted. At least not everything was copied and pasted. They really wanted positive, encouraging, and uplifting. I think that doesn't mean we have to tell them they're doing a good job, but when I read the comments that they were making, it was really clear that what they meant was they liked feedback that came from the context of an instructor who seemed supportive and interested in their success. So my sense is they perceived critical feedback as constructive when it felt like it was coming from a teacher who was a real teacher that was interested in guiding them towards success. You know, one of the #1 things students pointed out was active engagement and facilitator and discussion. And lots of students really couched that in terms of that's the way they felt like they were getting feedback and assessment from instructors. Lots of students also called out screencasts in particular. So one of the reasons I'm encouraging us to think maybe a little bit more about formative assessment and feedback is that's the time when we can really capitalize on teaching. And since we want to teach anyway and we want to be present in classes, we can be present and teach and give formative feedback all at the same time. So in that sense, I think it is more efficient. I'm going to quit talking now and let anybody else jump in. Ideas for efficiencies in giving feedback. What's working?
My philosophy is, as an online instructor, you kind of have to be a hustler of instructing. And I think it's just like contacting them all the time, sending out emails to the entire class, probably even more than once a week, like here's what's going on, and just really pushing the material. I mean, in a perfect world, they would just read your schedule and read your syllabus and know exactly what to do. But I mean, I teach an intro, 100 level class, and I don't know, I think you just really have to push it out there and give them feedback, not just in one different format, like text feedback, for example, but think about different ways. I mean, screencasts, audios, do videos, examples, and just really kind of run the gamut. I think different students will pick up on different parts of it, but yeah, what do you guys think of that?
See, I was here to find out how to do a better job in less time.
Well, let me jump in here. As a coach, I do not want anybody spending more time than they're spending now. And my sense is online instructors in general are spending more time teaching than face-to-face instructors. And as an ethicist and someone who cares about teachers, that is not sustainable. My sense is those of you who are here are probably on the top of that curve, right? I mean, you are already probably doing more than the average online instructor, and the average online instructor is doing more. I do think we have to find ways to do, again, to be more efficient, to find more time to do things well without tacking on extras. So, I mean, I definitely hear you. I think we have to. And the reason I asked, is anyone tracking how much time their assessment and feedback takes, is I've started doing it this semester because I'm really trying to think about how can I feel competent as a teacher in a reasonable amount of time. And unless I'm tracking how much time things are taking, I really don't know. And I mean, I am literally, I could show you. I'm actually going to turn on my webcam and you can see what I'm doing. You know, I mean, here is actually my little cheat sheet where as I'm grading papers with Carrie, we're actually tracking when did we start grading, when did we finish, how many total minutes did it take, and, you know, I don't know what I'll do with that, but we're really going to try to, you know, see how much we're doing and how effective it is. John asks, what's a reasonable amount of time? I almost hate to say this, but I'm going to. We are all paid for every credit hour we teach, we're paid for 2 hours, right? So if we're teaching a 3-credit class, we're paid for 6 hours a week. And I'm not suggesting that's realistic, but I think what that cashes out to is for a face-to-face class, that means you're getting paid for the 3 hours that you're teaching, and you're getting paid for 3 hours on top of that. I'm saying the way we run our models, that's how things are calculated. Yeah, it's. I'm not saying it is funny, but I guess my point is, regardless of whether it's 6 hours or 9 hours or 12 hours, whatever it is, we could easily spend an entire 12 hours just doing feedback, right? I mean, that is not sustainable. So, you know, if we're teaching 4 or 5 classes, I mean, realistically, we have to think about how can we do a quality, competent job in a relatively short number of hours. And that may mean picking and choosing, where do we give canned feedback, right? Where do we use auto-graded quizzes? Where do we use copy and paste? Where do we give feedback and screencasts to the whole class? And where do we really prioritize that meaningful one-on-one feedback, right? I mean, that's what I want to help us figure out, is how can we do a good job, a meaningful job. You know, my sense is most online instructors feel like they're not doing as good a job as they could, even though they're working harder than they should have to. And, you know, that does not make me happy as an instructional coach.
Think about how I can convert something that's a classroom, a face-to-face sort of tradition into online. So when I think about, and this is what I've said for years, is that a traditional classroom is one person teaching 25 students, one class with 25 students. Online, I have 25 classes with one student each. And so always trying to build that community and make it more of a group. But in reality, as we said at the beginning of this, it's just constant personal tutoring. I can't remember who wrote that at the very beginning. So one of the things that, especially in the beginning, when students are making kind of consistent mistakes that they always do, that in the beginning assignments, I find the news very helpful, whether it's a screencast or sort of a 2D announcement in the first grades, just to say, okay, I keep the feedback short and individually, but then sort of a class almost, let's look at this as a class. If you got in this range, you know, did you cite your sources properly? Did you, you know, look at the length requirement? So there's an opportunity in the beginning to be more efficient instead of this 25 individual classes, to do it more using the news.
Let me throw something else out. Martha, are you using audio feedback? I'm not sure if Martha's still listening.
I'm clicking.
I
stopped using it, Eric, because one student had an iPad and she could not hear the audio feedback.
Okay.
Since I didn't know what type of computer students were using, I just stopped it altogether, even though many students said it was effective.
The reason I ask is, I'm just thinking, something I've been trying lately is, I haven't tried the audio. I love the idea of, you know, using the add audio to a discussion or anywhere and just doing 1 minute of personalized feedback to each student each week. I mean, I was just thinking that's something I could try. Now, I haven't actually tried it. You know, I would just suggest, Martha, for that one student, you could do, you know, 1 minute of typed feedback. If you just asked who can listen to these and who can't, you know, you could certainly try that. You can also just, something I've been trying is, I'm in discussion. I don't always want to post a long discussion message, but, you know, anywhere in D2L where you see a student's name and it's underlined, if you click on it, it opens up an email window. And in, you know, just a few seconds, I can type a little bit of feedback to a student. I guess I'm trying to balance here, what is it that makes a student, I'm looking at this guiding us like a real teacher. You know, when I read that, the sense I get from many online students is they don't feel like there's a real teacher out there. And I don't want to be a computer grading for students. So I'm really looking for, how can I make that personal connection that is clearly so important to students, so that all of the other kind of feedback I give, if it is canned or in a news item or in a screencast, you know, appears to be more personal, right? I don't think everything has to be personal and direct. So just an idea. I wonder about, you know, thinking about doing, you know, kind of short 1 minute feedbacks to students, or finding ways to reach out to them individually, or to keep track of, you know, who you really feel like you need to reach out to. Maybe half your class is doing great and, you know, they're comfortable with the feedback they're currently getting. Yeah, Beth says, I use discussions and other written assignments for teaching in a more formative way. I mean, I should have paid you $5, Beth, to say that. I really feel like discussions are a way to, it's not multitasking. It is really hitting multiple birds with one stone. I mean, when you participate in discussion, you are present to students. You get to actually feel like you're a part of the class, which I think many of us love, to actually feel like we're in a class. We get to be teachers. We get to capture the teachable moment. We get to make personal connections with students. We get to read and do formative assessment, and we get to do formative feedback all at the same time. Yeah, well, when we meet, I'll buy you a cup of coffee, Beth. Maybe it won't be $10 worth. Beth, Martha says, where do you post canned feedback? What I mean by canned feedback is the sort of thing you might copy and paste, and I use it everywhere. I mean, if I'm commenting on quizzes or activities, I use quizzes for activities or writing prompts. You know, as I'm typing feedback, and it's something I think I'm going to talk to many students about, I'm writing it in a Word document so I can copy and paste and, you know, then, you know, add a few personalized elements. You can also, again, if you haven't tried GradeMark, right, that's this tool associated with Turnitin.com. You can build your own codes and your own, so I mean, there's efficiencies there too. And I think I would also say when I do my screencast, that's canned feedback, right? I'm talking to the entire class. I do 1 10-minute screencast where I give feedback to the whole class. Here's what I'm seeing going on in discussion. Here's what I'm seeing happening in the quizzes this week. I might call out a few students by name. You know, Dave and Crystal, we're having this really interesting discussion. You should jump in and check it out. So-and-so raised this question. I thought it was interesting. Lots of you seem to be confused about this item, so I'll clarify it, right? I mean, that I consider canned feedback. It's not one-on-one. I'm browsing through the chat. So anybody else jump in. We've got about 8 minutes left. And I would just say, anybody who hasn't had a chance to talk, if you have something to say, something to offer, or a question to ask, hit it with us. Hit us with it, please.
Eric, can you hear me?
I can.
I was going to try to mention this a while back when you were talking about audio feedback, and I missed my shot, so I'll go back to that now. I haven't really tested this out rigorously, but I'm hoping the audio feedback is useful for drawing attention to people's students to their poor wording and grammar. Because sometimes what I'll do is I'll read whole sentences from the paper verbatim. And I'm hoping that, you know, when they hear it, you know, not just reading it or skimming through it on a written page, but when they actually hear the words, they'll really realize how poorly something is worded, or they'll spot the grammatical errors. So I'm trying to use the audio feedback, among other things, you know, use it for that function, you know, to really draw a more explicit attention to things like grammar and wording.
I love it. I love it. And I'm just thinking audio would work, but so would a screencast. I'm imagining you pull their paper up and, you know, you're reading it. They're actually seeing it. Let me throw out another idea that is kind of a rider on Kevin's. I've been hearing about the development for next semester about the new developmental English curriculum, the CCR curriculum. What's going to be required as part of that curriculum will be for students to make their own screencasts as a way to engage with their instructors, right? I mean, the commentary between instructors and students in the CCR curriculum is going to be via screencast. So students are going to be creating screencasts. I'm just thinking, Kevin, what if you ask students to do a screencast of their paper and read a paragraph out loud as a part of a drafting process? I just wonder if they might catch some of those errors themselves. And I'm going to quit talking. 6 minutes left. Who wants to jump in? You can comment on what Kevin said or offer something else. Or Kevin, if you want to rebut.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought of doing something similar to that before. I was a little afraid of the sort of technological hurdle that's going to be for some students.
Let me add this. We're going to work on the protocol because we're going to be asking all the developmental English students to do it online. So when we finalize, I mean, we're going to work through it. I'm going to be testing it this semester. So I will come up with a way, and if it works for students, I'll share it with everybody. So if you want to wait and let me test it out, I will make sure. I'm not positive, Beth, if it's 092 or 094. I'm not sure exactly which of the particular CCR classes that will be a part of. I'm not positive. But I will report out to everybody here. I do have, right now, if you go to my coaching site in D2L, I have a screencasting workshop. It is a piece of, you know, it's a Word document with directions on how to do screencasting. You could start there. I mean, my sense is a student could read that and do a screencast, right? I mean, using 2 free programs. So I don't think it'll be sufficient, but if you want to get started now, it's a place to go. It's a place to start anyway. 5 minutes and counting. Anybody else got something? I want to go back to what Jennifer said. Now that I just see her, I remember she posted something in the chat. Jennifer says, I used to use the same discussion over 2 weeks in order to go deeper into the topic. No, that's not it. Jennifer, do you want to jump in again and see if your mic is working now? Just sorry, I know you had something to say, and now I can't find it. Here she is. Jennifer says, it feels like an improvement would be to schedule more targeted communication, just-in-time messaging about the instances of feedback and purpose. Use this feedback to revise the paper. Maybe that was it. Sorry, Jennifer, if I missed your comment. Thanks, John, for promoting my website. That's really your, I mean, I'm posting things there, but it's for you. So if you have, why don't I show it with a few minutes left. Your screen just changed because I just took over your screens. This is engagingideas.com. It is the website I'm using for my coaching site. So, you know, here's what I had up. I said that I had a screencast on assessment and feedback. That's this, if you want to come here and see it. Other screencasts that I've done. Here's my guide to screencasting. There's lots of things I find. You know, you can always go to engagingideas.com. You can get here. I will also say I have offered a couple of times if people want to opt in to my newsletter, you will get all of these updates sent out through email. Many of you, I think, are already on that list. If you're not already subscribed to my newsletter and you would like to be, just send me an email and I'll get you into that newsletter. And what I really want to do with this coaching site is, you know, just make it a place where I can share best practices, or again, I'm putting best practices in scare quotes. I don't think we've been teaching online long enough to even use the words best practices. We've been doing it less than 20 years. It makes what I think is what seems like it might be working, and how can we think about how to assess what really is working.
I think it's just a matter of engagement. Whatever works is going to get more student involvement. So for my online class, each week is an experiment, and just keep trying new things, and wherever they participate more, then that tells me it's more effective.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, and I'll just add to that, John. Since I'm a philosopher and I'll challenge assumptions, I don't want to assume that my anecdotal memory of what seems to be working really is working. I mean, clearly, sometimes we can really get a sense of what's working, but I am really interested in helping people think about actual assessment, right? I mean, how can we really measure what's working and what's not working? And if you're interested in coming up with a project that, you know, might actually help you assess some of these things and find out how to be more efficient, talk to me. Probably in the next few weeks, you're going to see an announcement come out about grant opportunities for next year. And if anyone wants to write a grant, or even a small grant on how to do assessment, or even if you don't want a grant, certainly talk to me about it. We are out of time, so I can hang around for a few minutes if anyone has any last questions they want to talk about. Otherwise, I hope you got something out of this, and you know, I really appreciate you taking the time on a Friday afternoon to talk about teaching. Thanks, everybody.
Eric, just a reminder, you might want to kill the recording.
Just did.